Let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the award-winning podcast where we talk about gaining, fetishism, and everything plus size. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're continuing our series of culture episodes, and we're welcoming to the show for the first time, Joe.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Joe, how are you today, my love?
I am fine, thank you. I just started working, so it's proving to be not necessarily difficult, but a bit tiring to start after 5 months of doing basically nothing. But I'm confident I will pick up the pace.
Lord knows I know that feeling. God damn. Well, listen, hopefully today's episode is something fun and joyous for you to dig into. So, Joe, my love, are you ready to get into it?
I am ready.
Fabulous. So listen, first things first, tell us where you're from. What is the day-to-day culture like?
Okay, I am from northern Italy, in particular from a town halfway between Milan and Venice, or near Verona, if you've read or seen anything from Romeo and Juliet. And it's called Brescia, and it's, as I said, quite a small town, but lately, in the last, I think, 10 years, it's started to come out and become a bit more lively, thankfully. And I've spent there my first 19 years because in September of 2019, I moved to Milan to study for university. I just got my master degree in engineering. And that's about it about me, I think. The day-to-day culture you asked, I would say it's because I've been lucky enough to go for 1 year from August of 2017 to June of 2018 to the United States. I was in Cincinnati as an exchange student. And so I've had the chance to see life in Italy and in the United States, I would say. I mean, I think they're pretty similar. We just have different probably ideas about how to, as you asked, to do day-to-day life and what we want out of life in general. I would say, like, when I think about life here, maybe I'm still thinking about university, but also right now that I'm starting a job, I would say when we go out, like when we clock out, I think we are more inclined maybe to go out for a drink, for an aperitivo, or maybe even for dinner. And even when we are done with dinner, maybe we will tend to stay outside of the restaurant and still speaking. I think in Italy and maybe more in Europe in general, which might be stereotypical, we tend to take life more relaxed. Life in the United States, I think it might be a bit more hectic. But
to say the least.
Okay, I'm glad you agree.
Like, you believe me, I'm sorry, but like, yeah, Americans, like we are trained to work until we drop dead.
Okay.
And then we're made to feel guilty for taking time off to actually enjoy life.
How dare you die? Like, okay, no, I understand. No,
the work ethic over here is just like work, earn money, pay your taxes, and then die.
Luckily, I mean, it's awful to hear you say that, but luckily here it's not like this. At least for me, at least for now, I would say I've been lucky enough that life is still enjoyable somewhat.
I'd certainly say the same thing, like Australia versus the UK. Like, the UK, I think, a little bit emulates America in that there is more of a, like, work, sort of live to work rather than work to live. And I would say in Australia, it depends on the industry, certainly, but Australia, in my experience, is certainly a lot more laid back. Very pro-holiday, very pro-taking time off, very pro, the Sunday sesh and an extra pint after, very that. So it's interesting, kind of balancing sometimes, I suppose, European ideals of things versus American ideals of things. I've expressed this before. Australia, my experience, certainly now seeing more of America and more of Europe, it exists at this intersection, interestingly, between the two, sort of rubbing up against itself sometimes. But
well, you remember how I told you about that that time that I was at work and the manager was like, we really need someone to stay over. Can you stay over? And I said no. And I thought that'd be the end of it. But then she's like, well, why? And I just looked at her and I said, because I don't want to.
Mm.
Like, do you need another reason? Like, if I say no, no is an answer.
Yeah, like you can ask, and I do think it's fine to ask because I am an employee of yours. You're looking for a favor. Like sometimes it pays to be charitable, but also if I don't want to, I don't want to, and that truly is the end of the story. So, but what about misconceptions, my love? I think everywhere's kind of got stereotypes, right? What would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about Italy?
You said misconceptions or stereotypes. It's a bit tricky because there are some, I mean, I'm sure stereotypes which unfortunately, or like just in general, prove to be true, but not for everyone in Italy. I think when people like from outside Europe, like the US, Australia, or somewhere else, think about Italy, they think about like a sunny place, yes, and with people being warm, welcoming, which is, I would say, true. I mean, maybe I'm once again dealing in stereotypes, but maybe it's truer for the southern part of Italy. People in the north maybe tend to be a bit more closed off. They tend to, as Tim said, maybe think more about work and life in the southern part of Italy is meant more to be enjoyed. Here in Milan, people seem to be thinking a lot about working, working, and working. But I would say this might be the biggest misconception, like that everyone is going to be warm and welcoming. Like we're not going to be rude, but some people might have like react differently from what you are expecting them.
That makes sense. I suppose like obvious misconceptions are going to come down to the stereotypes that people will think, right? And same thing with Australia. Everyone assumes that everything Australian is Sydney, and therefore it's Sydney, it's blonde, everybody surfs, everybody's tanned and very fit, everybody speaks with a certain inflection, etc. So probably the same thing with Italy, right? The a stereotype about everyone lives in Rome and it's all about pizza and pasta and doing the hand motions and
And as someone who has dated a lot of Italian Americans, like that was my exposure, was like all through Italian Americans. And I'm not talking about like second generation. I'm talking about like seventh generation. Like, and it's so funny because they all claimed to be of Sicilian descent, which I had no way of proving one way or another. But then they were trying to, like, every single one of the Italian American, Sicilian descended, self-proclaimed men that I have dated tried to blame all of their bad behaviors on, well, it's just a Sicilian thing, it's an Italian thing. And I'm like, but you're not even your great grandparents were from Italy. Like your great like they immigrated over in the 1890s, for God's sake. It's like, so a lot of the exposure I've had to Italian culture has been filtered through that lens. And it mostly just revolved around family gathering, food, and teaching me how to say fuck your mother in Italian.
Have either of you been to Italy, actually?
I've never been to Italy. I want to go really badly. I want to see Rome. I want to see Milan. I want to see Pompeii. I want to see Naples. I want to see Sicily. There's another little island. Oh God!
Sardinia?
The only reason I know about this island is because the Costa Concordia wrecked off the shore of it.
Ah, Isola
But
d'Elba.
yeah, it looks like a beautiful island.
yeah. You know what? You mentioned being near the Milan area. Stereotype would be Milan, that everyone there is obsessed with fashion and that, the streets are just run with like, I suppose, like market stalls of fabrics and everything like that. But fun fact, the reason why Tim wants to go back to Italy is because the last time he saw it, Vesuvius erupted, and he just kind of wants to see what's become of the land since then.
Oh, okay. I mean, Mount
He
Vesuvius,
he he
Mount
loves doing this
Etna.
to me. He loves doing this to me because we were having a conversation way back when, like years ago, when we were talking about if we could go back to any specific point in history, where would we go? And I said I would want to be able to safely witness the eruption in 79 AD of Vesuvius because it was like those kinds of eruptions don't happen that often. Like those are huge, like planet altering eruptions. And so I said, as long as I could witness it from a distance, he's like, oh, so you don't mind like watching all of the death and destruction? And I'm like, Well, I mean, this would be like one of the most significant points in ancient history. It's like
Well,
it's
I get
either
that.
that, it was either that or going back to like seeing Rome after Caesar got stabbed and like, Augustus came in and started to form the empire. Like, so either way, they're kind of both bad.
Yeah, probably Caesar being stabbed like had bigger impact on the whole like of history, but I'm sure watching the Vesuvius erupt would be breathtaking or inspiring. I don't know how to say it without sounding like I would enjoy the death of the people, but like I'm sure it would be spectacular.
Yeah, like I don't want anyone to think that I want to watch people die. It's more like, this, like I said, significant point in ancient history, like these kind of eruptions don't
Well,
happen that often.
that might be a question worth asking here actually, because it feels like it's kind of come into the zeitgeist of straight men typically seem to have this obsession with ancient Rome and the Roman Empire and this. It's like a thing that's happening online at the moment. As an Italian living in Italy, like, do the Italians like give a fuck these days about like the Roman Empire and the ancient world, or are people more like, sure, that was ancient times and no one really cares?
Do people care? I would say yes, maybe mostly because of the memes. We obviously study a lot of times through elementary school and then middle school and then high school about Rome and the Roman Empire and everything. And luckily, we have one history professor from here. He's called Alessandro Barbero, and he's very popular online. I don't know if he's a great historian, but he's really good at like explaining stuff and making it making you passionate about it. And a lot of people follow him online. So I would say at least about in this way they care about it. Maybe we're a bit I don't know, tired of hearing about the Roman Empire after 18, 13 years of high school or of school in general. Like we would like to maybe learn a bit more about modern and contemporary history, if that makes sense.
Like over here, like I don't want them to not talk about the Civil War, but I want them to stop reenacting it because I think that's just silly. Like, like the South lost. Get over it.
Yeah, my grandparents fought in the Great Civil War and they were Confederates. It's my part of my tradition. Not really, but okay.
Oh, and you know what? Another thing that's probably very relevant to the moment. We have a new pope. We have a new
Mhm.
pope. And obviously, I understand a little bit that the Vatican City is its own micronation. It technically operates outside of Italy and some of the concord of like how Europe works, but also it is still physically located within Italy. And I'm kind of curious, like as far as you're aware, like does the election of a new pope or the operations of the Vatican, like does it have much influence and effect on Italy as a whole, or is it just kind of like it's there, it's some dudes in some capes milling about doing some shit?
No, and it's very power. It's still very powerful. Also inside the Italian, I would say, government or government agency. I don't know how to describe it. Unfortunately, like religion still plays a big part, despite the fact that we're supposed to be secular. If that's the correct adjective. We're supposed to be about the separation of church and state, and unfortunately, abortion here is still a big issue. Also like drugs about like marijuana. I would say the Vatican doesn't really concern about it, but if they said something against it, we would be even more against it than we are now. And so, I mean, unfortunately, the Vatican, which I really like I'm atheist, but Vatican City, the Sistine Chapel, the St. Peter's Basilica are breathtaking, and Rome is my favorite city in the world, also for this reason. But they have a bit too much power, if you ask me.
Hank,
Yeah,
listen,
I would agree with that. I'm not a practicing Catholic. I was raised a Catholic. I converted to paganism at 15. But like I can say I understand what you're saying. It's kind of like I'm not if I saw Notre Dame, right, I would be amazed by it. Like despite the fact that I'm not Catholic, you know.
yeah. And there's certainly a conversation, I think we've talked about this potentially in the past on some art episodes, right? Up until a certain point in history, like art, especially on a grand scale, was never commissioned for anything outside of the church because there was no, like, cultural impetus for it. It was very much who are you? Why would you have art to display? There's no galleries, those don't exist. It's literally just architecture that exists in the world, or it's what's on the roof of the church. So, art and its tie to religion and history is kind of you can't really disentangle it. And this, that's probably a conversation more specifically for art episodes. But bringing it back to Italy itself, you've mentioned perhaps certain institutions within Italy itself maybe have a bit too much influence. Let's talk about influences for things like weight. What is the culture like in Italy when it comes to being a fat person, becoming fat, gaining weight, things like body positivity and gaining?
Okay, so this might get a bit personal, so stop me if it's too much, let's say. Once again, I think it's about unfortunately stereotypes, because we obviously have fat people here in Italy, also like very fat people, but they are more concentrated, I would say, in the south. In the south, there is a culture of as Tim said, family being together, and when you're together, you eat. And you don't eat because you're together, like you just have to eat to the point maybe of being sick. Like there's always a lot of food involved when it's, I would say, about the south. The north maybe has a more conventionally healthy idea about food. We would maybe, when I think about the summer, we would eat maybe like fruit, mozzarella, something fresh and light, so that you can unfortunately keep working because simply the temperatures here allow you to work also during the summer. I would say, despite being hot, when you go to the south, it's unbearably hot. Like it gets up in the hundreds, I would say, like 98, 100 Fahrenheit or 35, 40 Celsius. So, I mean, even you're not going to work, so you might as well eat, I would say. And once again, to the Italian speakers, I would like to apologize if this is not the case, but this is what I feel like it's true. Regarding body positivity, I think we're seeing a trend in general, thankfully everywhere in the world, people are a bit more comfortable, maybe being big, being more themselves. I'm not hugely into fashion, but I think some people might feel a bit more free and daring regarding their clothes choice, and they don't feel as much need to hide, maybe. I can't really speak for everyone when you ask about being fat or becoming fat, because I've known I'm a gainer and I'm a part of the community for 12, almost 13 years now. But I've never really acted on it, and I managed to gain about 60 pounds in the last 2 years going to the gym, because I mean, my idea was always to become just fat, and for now I'm trying to get maybe more muscular, bearish look, I would say, like muscle gut, muscle bear, something like this, in the hope that it would be more socially acceptable. Unfortunately, other people's opinion, and particularly my family, is still a huge influence and factor against actually trying to get fat. Maybe it's not the right choice for me, maybe, but I won't know until I do it, and that's the main reason why I'm not doing it, unfortunately. My friends, on the other hand, have been more accepting. I'm not out as a gainer to any of them except one, and they obviously noticed my body changes in the last couple of years, but most of them have just said, I've gotten bigger, I look good, and maybe they have not been complimentary, I would say, like they haven't said keep going, but they don't critique me, let's say. The one friend I've had to tell gaining about because it was, I mean, I made a mistake, let's say. She's also been extremely supportive. I also told her about my situation with my family, and she said, look, I support you as long as it does not impact your health. The moment it starts to become cumbersome or you get like consequences, I'm gonna go to your family side, which I would say is fair. I mean, I have an interest, I would say, in healthy gaining, but I have not pursued it for the moment. I'm just thankful, let's say, she's as supportive as she is for now.
So what kind of resources exist for plus size people where you live? Like, is it the kind of thing where there's a whole store that they can go to, or do they have to shop at like a really small rack? And at like, because I'm sure that with Milan being a fashion capital, they're not that interested in catering to plus size bodies.
As I said, I can't really speak on this point. I'll try to elaborate because I haven't been big for. I'm tall. I'm 6'2", 188 centimeters, but I haven't really been. I've been thin for most of my life, and I'm not really into fashion. I would say some of my friends, one of my dearest friends from the community, has always been very fat. And he still is in the 350 pounds around, and he's as tall as me. So he's not small by any parameter, and he's always managed to dress not only like properly, but he also wears nice clothes. So I'm sure there are resources. Unfortunately, I can't speak on this, and if I may elaborate, I went shopping a couple of days ago for suits for work, and most of the sizes were like I don't think I've ever met a man who wore an XXS. So or I'm not sure they are the same sizes in numbers, but the XS or S for shirts or jeans, trousers. Most of my friends are tall, or I have some shorter friends, but they're all like normal people. So I would say maybe an M. There is a huge imbalance, I would say, between the sizes I would expect from a country who's thought of being like fat and the sizes we find in a store.
But I would think that like because remember this would also include like fast fashion, the kind of things that you can buy in any department store. Like if you just need a t-shirt, like you haven't bought a new t-shirt in forever and you want to go out and buy one, did you have difficulty like with your height? Like if your torso is longer, like did you have problems finding the correct fit or something like that?
Okay, also fast fashion, you said. I would say yes, but luckily, let's say the problem has started when I started filling out my belly and my chest. Previously, like the shirt just fell onto me. It covered what it needed to cover, but since I've gotten bigger, I've had a bigger problem. Like it's become more of a prominent problem. I have some shirts I still wear. My arms are filling out, so the sleeves are tight, and there's no easy way to say it. But like the lower part of my belly is exposed sometimes, like maybe a couple inches too, which
Yeah.
can be nice if you are into it. But some people just maybe would prefer not to see it, especially if they are civilians.
Do you get that thing where if you raise your arms up too high, the hem of your shirt like practically is sitting on your navel?
Always, always.
Yeah.
Like I can't move properly if I'm around people and wearing those type of shirts. Like I have to rely on something a bit more loose.
Once again, we come back to the point that yes, in some circumstances, we can find it arousing to see a little slip of that underbelly hang. However, if you just want to like feel good in your day, you may not be thinking with a horny brain. You might not want to be necessarily showing all of that. So it can be a struggle. I know Primark has some stores in Italy, and obviously that's a huge clothing thing here in the UK. And it's always Primani. It's not Primark, it's Primani. The joke
Okay.
of trying to make it sound fancier than what it is, right? But like, clothing access is a really important thing, and I'm glad that there are people in your life, gainers, who have some experience with clothing. That as you grow, if you grow into a size where maybe your existing knowledge base of clothing that is accessible to you, if that dips, there are people you can speak to who maybe have more of that knowledge. This again comes back to a really important point we always talk about with community, right? Like having community with your fellow gainer is not just, hey, let's have gainer sex. It's also, hey bitch, I've started to get chubby into a territory where I'm starting to get a discoloration on my thighs, where I'm starting to get chub rub in places I didn't know that it was gonna rub. I'm starting to get this experience with skin tags. Like, what can you tell me about this sitch, right? So like, it just comes back to that. Like, good to have community, and I'm glad you've got that.
Thank you.
So how do you feel or how do you view gaining culture in more heavily represented places?
I'm mostly, as I said, on Instagram and Grommr, so I'm gonna have to talk about the US and UK and Australia. I would say more the English-speaking countries. I see one thing I see about also just like scrolling Grommr. I see that there is an actual community. Like people, despite the size of like the US being gigantic, there also seem to be a sense of community. Like people are friends, maybe just online. I'm not sure. I'm sure some of people have met, and I often see pictures of people meeting and gathering. Also, like for the cruise, or in Chicago, I'm thinking, or maybe LA. This is one nice thing which unfortunately is not present in Europe or maybe just in Italy. I'm not sure. I see that there is like people are making friends, and I have been lucky because it's not nice to say. Maybe I've been picky also. Like I've always tried to be friends with people who I knew I was going to have a connection eventually, like based on their posts and then likes and dislikes. And I've made some great friends for the community. Some of them are now my best friends, along with my civilian best friends. But one thing I would like to see, as I said, is people becoming closer. Because yes, we are here because we like feederism and everything, but we are also people. So I enjoy going to the movies. I enjoy reading. I enjoy biking. So it might be nice to get to know the person behind the belly, let's say, or the body.
So there are no Grommr that happen near you at all? Like, are there Grommr that get announced for Italy? I mean, not even for Rome?
No, I don't. Not that I know of.
Huh, that's a surprise to me because like two, well, I mean, yeah, I would say that they were both legends, but there were two gainers from like back when I was 18, 19-ish that were both from Italy, and they both made a big splash on Belly Builders and like the websites that came before Grommr, but they're still around, but I don't think that many people know about them anymore. Belly Grow and God, I can't remember what his name was now. I'm sorry. There was another Italian gainer that was really popular on those websites. So it's a bit of a surprise to me that like you've got like those two legendary gainers from Italy, and like you'd think that that would foster something, but I guess no matter where you go, we all run into the same problem. Nobody wants to meet up.
I mean, uh, I would maybe like to be an aggregator and try to get people to know each other, but as I mentioned, it's also about likes and dislikes of people, and I get that maybe I get along with two people who might not get along themselves. So, I mean, it's difficult, and I've had the idea in the past since. Like northern Italy is not really big, so there might be a meeting in Milan. Yes, it's also proved difficult to, let's say, get everyone to agree to come to one weekend, one day, one dinner, and maybe get to know each other from zero, because maybe they haven't chatted. Like one might be from Turin and one from Venice. You know, you're never gonna meet, so why would you start speaking in the first place?
Yeah, I think the gainers you were thinking of, Tim, were Big Pliny and Little Pliny. Uh,
Oh, for God's sake. Another Vesuvius reference.
yes, this is an Italian episode, my love. Um, but to speak to your point there, Tim, you say there's that sense of surprise that to have such prominent community members, and yet it does not necessarily involve community. I think just comes back to the point that, I think people really do underestimate what it means to develop relationships and create a culture that brings people together. Like we've often said with regards to community, it's great that people want to present themselves as a sexual person and, have a presence online and potentially even produce content and all that. But just because you follow that person does not mean you have community with them. Having community is truly about developing relationships, ironically and metaphorically feeding into one another's lives with value and growth. Like you were expressing, Joe, like it's not just, oh, the sexual element of I find you attractive, it's also, do we share a common interest in film? Do you want to go biking with me at some point? It's how do you develop a community that is more full-figured, again, ironically, and robust, more than just what this idea of sex is. And I think that shows, right? There are plenty of people who are quite well regarded in online spaces, but don't go to events and don't make their presence known because they're not necessarily invested in community. And that's okay. But again, I think it brings up a question of how do we develop that community with one another?
Yeah, I mean, I would like just to say you mentioned community, and as I said, I'm gonna meet with a friend this weekend when I haven't seen in 3 months, and he's also one of my best friends. Like we don't talk that often because I'm busy, he's busy, but I know that we're gonna be there for each other no matter what. And there's also another friend whom I met through gaming, but he, let's say, fell out of love with gaming. He's not really that much interested. But once again, he's one of my best friends. I've invited me to my graduation party, so he's met all of my civilian friends. I just said I met him in university because we also go to the same university. But I mean, he's a huge part of my life, and I'm really thankful that he's there for me, like when I need to.
That's totally fine and understandable. Like my parents think that James and I met on a cocktail party, a Zoom cocktail party during lockdown. That's what I told them.
Okay, perfect. I mean, as long as they don't know or don't know too much, that's fine, I would say.
Well, I mean, they know that I have a podcast, but I tell them it's about sex. So I said, please don't listen to it unless you want to know intimate details about your son's sex life, and that's kept them away. So
Work's an absolute treat, to tell you. Also, Tim, by the time I actually come around to visit and potentially meet, you're gonna have to run me that story just so I can be like, we met at a cocktail.
Oh yeah, right, yeah.
Because your mother, Ronnie, is gonna, how did you two boys meet again? And I'm gonna be like, yeah, Tim, it's been so long. Why don't you remind us? How did you and I meet after all?
A Zoom cocktail party.
Yes, Zoom cocktail party. Zoom cocktail. Yes. Now, we were going to ask about community, and obviously you've expressed a sense of like, there's not necessarily too terribly much happening in and around your area. It's maybe more that sense of like, and at least for you, engaging on that kind of one-to-one basis, which I think a lot of people do actually do, right? Like, I'm not necessarily big on going to events these days myself. I more keep it localized. But maybe that's what's going on for a lot of gamers in Italy. But like, let me pivot and ask you. I think, okay, do you know what? Because I feel like this is something where like, as Westerners, like the concept of certain Italian dishes are very synonymous with like shit your mum makes midweek because she wants to kill you, but she can't, otherwise she get called in by Child Protective Services. And so she throws like a frozen pizza in the oven. She makes like a really shit made spag bowl, throws it on the table and goes, there! And then she goes outside to chain smoke Slim Jims. But that's just my mum.
Every time you tell me about her, I'm just like,
Listen,
how did you survive childhood?
Listen, Linda Heinsohn is an incredible creature who has survived a lot of things in the world, and I, James Heinsohn, have survived even more. But the reason I bring this up is because, as I say, I feel like this is likely going to be the same thing with America. There are certain Italian dishes that are just like a pizza, a spaghetti, a thing, where it's just like, every mum kind of throws some together and makes it. And so everyone's kind of like, oh, I love Italian cuisine. And it's probably not the real shit, quite frankly. So I would like to ask you, what are some of your personal favorite Italian snacks, beverages, meals? Like, what really gets you going?
Okay, I'm assuming we're not speaking from a like gaming point of view, like more
No,
from
just
a
like
civilian point of
Italian, as
view.
in like, oh, you eat it and you're like, this
Yeah,
is
just your personal favorites.
Okay, I would say not to be too stereotypical, but during winter, late autumn, maybe still early spring, Sunday lunches, lasagnas are a big thing, at least for my family. We've started like the usual lasagna is like bechamel, okay, and cheese and meat, but we might also be doing like something like a sausage and mushrooms, which is maybe more like towards the northern, like more mountainous part of Italy. Which is really tasty. I mean, and I enjoy it. I'm gonna be sound so Italian, but carbonara is a huge favorite of mine. It's simple, it's quick. You can do it. I mean, for a lot of people easily. if we want to say maybe something vegan, I would say aglio, olio, e peperoncino, which is just garlic, olive oil, and some hot pepper. It's maybe even quicker than carbonara because you just like toast some garlic in oil and then throw some pepper, and it's delicious. Regarding drinks, unfortunately, I'm not a huge alcohol drinker. I mean, I'm more of a company drinker. So when I go out with friends, Spritz, Aperol Spritz has a huge place in my heart because it's the drink we used to drink after a university exam. Like if it went good or bad, we still drink Aperol Spritz. So I would say, I mean, I know it's silly and very common. There might also be Prosecco white wine, which my dad has been fond of for the past 3-4 years, I would say. So it's a constant presence in my house. Like I know I'm gonna be home for the weekend or the holidays, and there's gonna be at least one bottle in the fridge, and maybe one in the freezer if the one in the fridge is almost empty and the new one needs to be colder or when he opens it. Regarding snacks, I mean, unfortunately, also once again, I don't think we have many snacks in Italy, or maybe some Italian people in the future will correct me. I'm a huge fan of PB&Js, which I know are not Italian, but they are quick, cheap. You can make them in bulk, I would say. I'm more of a grazer than a stuffer, I would say. So I tend to eat more during the day, but it's always something like some bread, taralli. I don't know if you've heard of them. Some small sandwiches, or maybe dried fruits, cashews, nuts, stuff like this. Regarding snacks, I'm not sure.
And see, that's why I'm convinced that culturally you guys live longer than everybody else because of the olive oil, the garlic, the red wine, like, and then your snacks are all healthy things, fruits and nuts, and like, yes, bread, but you know, you're not eating an entire loaf of it. So,
No, no, most definitely. I mean, there is a Roman saying, a Roman motto, which is "in medio stat virtus," like moderation is key. So you can enjoy everything you want as long as you don't stuff yourself, which is not our case. But
I don't, I mean, I hope this, like, okay, so I also have heard this saying about Italians from all the Italian Americans that I've dated. They say, I live my life the Italian way. I drink a glass of wine, I have sex, I take a nap. I drink a glass of wine, I have sex, I take a nap.
there are worse ways to live, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I just, you know, I hope that that's not too like like, I hope that's not too much of a stereotype. I just always found it funny.
No, I mean, I'm sure there are some people who live like this way. So it might
Yeah.
not be common, but it might not be also a stereotype.
Every stereotype has got a grain of truth in there somewhere, girly. And also on the notion of bread, like, listen, like a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of balsamic in a little dish with some fresh bread. Like that on its own is a good nosh. Like it's fabulous. And sometimes I do feel like as gainers, we are looking for like the next like food or meal concept that could like be the secret to like rapid weight gain. Motherfucker, a bit of bread and a bit of good bread at that. I'd be I like I say in Australia you would say spag bowl instead of spaghetti bolognese, and we would say lasagna in the way we affect in our accent. I'm curious to know like how offensive it sounds to say Italian words with such an Australian accent.
No, I don't think it's offensive. I mean, you've adopted the Italian terminology, and you need to make it easier for people. So I mean, it makes sense. I'm not offended. I don't think anyone would be.
Yes, buongiorno, of course. And I found out for years my mother made what she said was carbonara, and my partner and I, we went on a stint where we were like, oh, we've got to try all these new things. And then we were sort of like going through childhood, being like, you know, what would your mum make? And I was like, oh, carbonara. Mum used to make this, loved it. And then I was looking up carbonara recipes online, and I'm like, this looks very dry. There's a lot of egg in it. And I was very confused. And so, of course, we're making it, and I'm like, I don't understand. This is not the meal that I had when I was a kid. And it's a fine meal. Carbonara is lovely. And I was so confused. And so I messaged my mother on Facebook to go, what is this carbonara that you would make? And she goes, oh, mate, it wasn't carbonara. I just said it was. What the fuck were you making us then? Oh, fettuccine bosciola. And I'm like, I've never fucking heard of this bosciola before. And so
Okay, perfect.
Apparently that's the thing. It's just a lot more cream, and I'm like, great. So yes, Bosciola. That's my Italian dish du jour. I quite like it. It's nice.
I wonder if she got that from the that's the American way to do it too, is to put a lot of cream in it.
I don't know.
So I'm wondering if maybe she got influenced by an American recipe.
Oh
I mean,
God,
there
Linda,
are two
American
factions in Italy saying carbonara needs cream, and some people say carbonara does not need cream. So, I mean, if you are of one of the two sides, you need to be careful not to mention it to people who are from the other side, because I mean, things are not gonna get violent, but you might get like a middle finger or something. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
No, that's fine. I'll absolutely go there with an Italian in that conversation. Very much here for it. And I know you said you're not necessarily much of a drinker, like alcoholic beverages, but would you say, like, growing up, there was like, oh, I don't know, like a fruit drink, like that you would have had as a kid, or like a
A
milkshake,
soda.
like just like what to you is like the quintessential Italian flavor drink that people love to have?
Italian favorite drink. I mean, I know I said I'm not a huge drinker, but we were allowed to taste at least wine. I think the first time I tasted wine was when I was 8, and also like when we were kids, still when we were like 10, 12, a little bit of Prosecco or champagne for Christmas holidays and New Year's Eve and stuff like this. We were allowed to drink. If I have to think of soft drinks, I would say Coke, Coca-Cola, and maybe Orangina. I don't know how you call it abroad. Fanta, like something orange flavored. I don't. We have something called Cedrata, which is like I don't know, like citrusy maybe. I'm not sure it's very common abroad, I would say, but it's also uncommon for people to like it here in Italy. Like if someone likes it, he's gonna have it often. But I don't think there are a lot of people who enjoy it, or at least make it known. Not that there is anything wrong with it, but it's just uncommon, I think.
Is it I'm sorry, I don't want this to come off as a stereotype too, but like because it's got my brain going now. Like is coffee as popular as it seems to be? Because like again, I only have Western media to go by and the
No,
Italian Americans I
that's a
dated.
good question because the Australian myth, because Australians are massive coffee snobs. The Australian myth is that basically at the turn of the century, when international travel became a lot more affordable and Aussies were like, oh, we can actually go traveling for a lot more funsies now. A lot of Aussies went to Europe because they had family that had come from Europe, and so people were like going back and meeting people and doing all this. And they had discovered the Italian way of doing coffee. And apparently, prior to that, coffee culture in Australia was shit, just like most other places. But it is because of that insistence of making good coffee, which reportedly came from Australians like flooding Italy, that Australia has now developed what is considered to be world-class coffee standards. So actually, that's a good question. Like, how legitimate is the coffee culture there?
I mean, coffee, and I'm speaking about as someone who just came out of university. I mean, it's important because when I'm thinking about exam periods, people drink coffee as soon as they wake up for breakfast. They have one when they arrive to university, one in the middle of the morning, one after lunch, one in the middle of the afternoon, and maybe one even after dinner, just to keep going after when you're done with food. I would say it's important because I drink milk in the morning, but most people here either have tea in the morning or coffee, and we do it with a mocha. I think you've heard of mochas before, and we just have maybe some milk, warm or cold, along with it, and biscuits, cookies, croissants. I don't know what you call them. Uh, we do have specific rules. I think you might have heard of, like no cappuccino after 10 a.m., or maybe you can have it in the middle of the afternoon for a snack, but you don't drink cappuccino outside of these ranges. There is also like we usually have when we are at a bar, we have espresso, which can be espresso, macchiato, or macchiato freddo. We have different like many different types of coffee, but it's meant as something to be enjoyed, but quickly, I would say. It's not something you sip on, like espresso is meant to be drank in the one moment. You just put the cup down and then go back to work.
James, you remember when we were in New York, when we got to Queens, we went to that little Italian cafe that was run by, I'm assuming an Italian woman. She definitely
Oh,
had an accent.
yes.
And I ordered a macchiato, and when she handed me the tiny little espresso cup, I was like, I think I'm a little confused as to what I ordered. And she's like, were you thinking an American macchiato? And I was like, I'm used to Starbucks. She's like, oh, okay, I get it. And she,
And so what she did, and you didn't see this because I was at the counter, she took the cup back and she took out a giant syringe of testosterone and all those other additives and corn syrup, and she injected it into the coffee. And then she took a gun, an AK-47, and she fired a couple of rounds right there into the coffee mug. She then filled it up with creamer, slapped it across the face, and then served it back. And I was like, oh, great. An American coffee. Wonderful.
Regarding coffee, there is a small anecdote I'd like to share. When I was in the US for my year abroad, my parents came to New York to visit me, and I went to New York. And it was freezing. I think it was one of the coldest winters they had there in a long time. And my mom wanted something warm, so we decided to go like to Starbucks for coffee. And she was handed a huge cup of boiling hot coffee. I would say like she spat it out as soon as she drank it, not because of the taste, but because of the temperature. Like she couldn't bear it. So I mean, she had a different idea of what she was gonna be drinking than what she had.
Yeah.
yeah, unfortunately, we don't play around over here. We heat coffee to like scalding, and I don't know why.
Well, because they're trying to recreate Mount Vesuvius. It all comes back to Vesuvius, Tim. It really does.
No, I think that they keep hoping that somebody's going to get burned and can sue somebody.
Oh, is this the McDonald's situation?
I
Uh,
mean, I have to assume that that's really where
Hmm.
it all comes from, but like, I don't know.
I mean,
I
I
have no
love
idea.
things done 90s style topped up, which is very Australian to have like a nice bit of extra foam. The milk is very creamy. And Australia invented the flat white, so like a nice standard milky coffee with like a nice creamy texture, very that. My personal preferred way of consuming, especially a shot of nice espresso, is affogato. So if there's like a nice scoop of like a vanilla bean ice cream, love an affogato moment. Absolutely fantastic. Now, I would be curious, for you, when you were growing up, were there people on TV? Or like characters, right? So like you're young, were there cartoon characters, people on TV, real life people? Was there anyone really that you looked at that was fat and made you go, oh, I want to be just like that?
I mean, I'm from Italy, so Western US culture had a huge influence on me. I would say I'm not sure about the English title, maybe Fairy Godparents.
The Fairly Odd Parents.
Fairly Godparents, okay?
Yeah, yeah. It was on Nickelodeon. Yeah.
Okay, there is an episode where Timmy gets fat and
Oh
everyone gets
yeah.
fat.
Makes
He
everyone
wishes
allergic to
to.
broccoli and then they're all about to fall into the sun and then they all gotta like eat broccoli again.
Okay, yeah, that was one of the moments. There's also another cartoon, but I don't. I mean, I remember the title in Italian, but not in English, where the character gets fat, and the character was actually an animal. So, I mean, I'm not a furry. I don't think I am, but that was also interesting to see. There was Owen from the first season of Total Drama, who was, I mean, fat and also apparently happy about it. So it was nice to see, like I would say, this representation. Now that I'm thinking about maybe TVs and movies or Italian characters. I can't recall any at the moment, and I would say still like some of the real life influences. In the first period, unfortunately, they were like headless pics of people I found online or on Tumblr or Instagram. There are some gainers that I've been started to look up to 7 years ago now when I joined Grommr, and I mean it's it has shifted. At first, it was more about becoming, as I said, fat, and now it's a more of a more muscular look. So I have different idols compared from to the past. But yeah, I would say, I mean, have been not any Italian people, but a few people abroad who have been. I mean, I look at them and I say that would be nice.
You see, I loved Fairly Odd Parents. I do a good Cosmo, but then I don't know if did you watch it in English or was it Italian that
No
you?
Italian.
Okay,
I think it was like 8, so it had to be Italian.
no, that's perfectly fine. Um, Because I'm gay, I loved, it was a show that came out in 2004 called Winx, which was an Italian
Oh,
show.
okay.
And that got my little gay heart fluttering. Oh, it was a great show. If anyone has watched Winx Club, it was an Italian produced cartoon that became very popular, and so they released it in the States and in Australia. I think similarly, like Totally Spies, I think that was French, maybe?
Okay. Yeah,
Like,
there was also an episode where they got fat, if I'm
yeah,
correct. Okay.
yeah. Love the Italian cartoons.
Oh, and of course, there is, I don't know if you've read this story or are aware of who Warren Davis is, but there is a Warren Davis story called The Italian Cousin.
Ah, okay. No, I've heard of Warren Davis and I've seen his drawings, but I don't think I've ever sat down and actually read a story like from head to toe.
Hmm.
I should read something, I'm assuming.
Well, I mean, I mean, if you can get past the fact that the protagonist and the other character are cousins, they're blood related. If you can get past that, then it's a great, it's your typical gainer fare. But I was wondering, what is your favorite like gainer related phrase that you can teach us in Italian? Like if you were gonna compliment a guy, a gainer, on his weight gain, on his belly, or like on any part of him that has to do with him getting fat, like what would you say to him?
I'm gonna focus, I would say, on me and some things I like to hear, which are said from my family in a derogatory tone, maybe, but they get me going, to to say the least. There are a couple of things my family, my dad in particular, says, which are sei manzo, which means like you're beefy, because manzo is beef, and or some friends in general, also in middle school, refer to people who were chunkier. They said sei spesso, which means you're thick. I mean, these are some nice things because they're not necessarily like sexual. Like anyone can be thick, anyone can be beefy. Even if you just go to the gym and you have not necessarily like abs, you might be beefy. So it's neutral, even civilian, I would say, and it can come from anyone.
So
Uh,
manso and so spesso.
Sei manzo e sei spesso, yes.
Nice. Okay. So manso, so spesso. Mm, nice and thick. Yes.
I love how your Australian accent got thicker when you said both of
It's
those.
soy manzo, soy spesso. Yes.
And so I know that we've kind of gone over the gaming community out there, and like we've discovered in most other places, there's not much in the way of community. What do you think needs to change in order for a community to really form and people to start supporting each other?
Okay, I'm gonna make a comparison here between, I would say, Grommr and Phoebe, which I've dabbled in, but the situation in, at least regarding Italy, is even worse than Grommr, because I mean, on Phoebe, people like really seem to be about the fetish, and that's it. On Grommr, as I said, at least I have managed to make friends, actual genuine friends who I care about, and I can hang out with like normally. We will, yes, maybe we will go to a restaurant, we will get a lot of food, but it's not something like that's the main point of meeting. I would say maybe someone needs to step up and be an aggregator, maybe like try to get people to meet, because we've mentioned the fact that there are one-on-one meetings, like friends hanging out, but it's just the two of them, which is fine. But I mean, you don't build a community this way. And the other thing we mentioned might be, as I said, trying to see past this. Like, yes, it's nice to have someone we can talk about regarding getting fatter, heavier experiences, some things that also might be unpleasant, and share this. But as I said, we're people. We have a life outside of the fetish. We have work. We have school. We have uh, other interests. So we need, I think, to accept this. Like, yes, we're people. We are lucky enough to find each other on here, and but let's try to be genuine friends, I would say.
Hmm. No, that makes perfect sense. And as we begin to close out here, my love, what is a question you want people to ask you about your life in Italy? And of course, what is the answer?
just thinking off the top of my brain, since I've started working, and we've mentioned like different work ethics from Europe and Italy, maybe it might be nice to for people to ask me what I want out of my work life. And the answer would be that I don't know, because I have just started, and for now, I mean, I'm sure it's gonna prove. I hope it's gonna prove satisfactory. I hope I will do a good job, and it's gonna allow me to grow as a person and as an engineer in particular. But for now, I just see work as something that allows me to live. So one thing, this might be the one thing that's on my mind that's been on my mind for the past two weeks, I would say, what I expect out of my work life.
That's perfect. And I think that speaks to an honesty about the human experience. We don't always know what we want and what's coming up next for us, but I love that you're here, you're in the work now, you're doing what you're doing, and those things will come to you in time. But Joe, I just want to say a massive thank you for your time today. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, darling, where can the listeners find you online?
They can find me on Grommr and Instagram. The handle is wanttogetchunky for both. As I said, I know I'm talking a lot about work, but since I'm going to have a salary, hopefully a lot of it will go towards food. So hopefully there will be some changes in the near, medium future by the end of the year.
I have money to buy the food. I mean, unfortunately, we're not all lucky enough to just get, anything donated. Some of us really have to, we have to put our, what do they call it, axes to the grindstone? Is that what they say?
But honestly, babe, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today. But that is a wrap for now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. Now, if you liked this episode, the podcast, our guest, or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram at thiccmouse and Grommr at Orpheus. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or on our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to become a financial supporter of the show, you can donate to our PayPal, and you can always write to us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Spotify podcast.
Artwork, media design, editing, and production by James Heinzen.
With original theme music by CYMK.